All right, now we're about to go to our interview with Don Browning and Holland van de Nieuwenhof. But first I want to show you a clip. This is an excerpt from the movie A Noble Lie, and it's Don Browning talking about the autopsy that was done on, or that wasn't done, on Terrence Yakey, who is one of the officers who got the key to the city. He was a hero, and then all of a sudden he ends up dead outside his car on this federal property with a gunshot wound to his head that he probably didn't give himself. Well, there's probably a 99% chance he didn't give it to himself, yet it was ruled a suicide. They went on and said he was drunk and drugs in his system, and then it was later revealed that, oh no, we did the toxicology test, and no, he didn't have any drugs or alcohol in his system. So this is a case of killing the messenger, somebody who saw something that he shouldn't have seen, and the FBI made sure he didn't say anything about it. And also I want to give a quick shout out to my two boys who are watching tonight. How y'all doing? And but now let's go to this clip, and then we're going to bring in Don Browning, retired OKC K-9 Unit police officer, and Holland van de Nieuwenhof, one of the researchers and producers of A Noble Lie. Let's go to that clip.
One of the things that surprised me was that there was no autopsy performed. The other thing that really bothered me was we were being told that Terry was high on drugs and drunk. And, of course, the medical examiner's office did a report on Terry and his injuries, which was really not an autopsy, but just an overview. And it showed that his BAC was 0, meaning no blood alcohol content. There was no drugs in his system. It bothered me that they didn't treat Terry like a police officer like he was. He was a good guy.
A deputy sheriff recorded this footage during one of the evacuations. Here the ATF is seen pulling out several weapons and blocks of what appeared to be plastic explosive. Was this the source of the bomb scare, or did this ordnance come from an illegal armory that witnesses report the ATF kept in the Murrah building? The ATF denies they kept any weapons or explosives in the building.
And you just saw an excerpt from A Noble Lie with an interview with Don Browning, retired OKC police officer. And then we went into what is being referred to as the Sumter tape, and that was just a little snippet of some tape that was shot during the rescue effort. And it shows in verifiable proof of ATF agents removing guns and what appears to be plastic explosives from the rubble. And so without further ado, we turn to our guests. We have Holland van den Nieuwenhof and Don Browning, OKC retired police officer. Fellas, how are you doing today?
Great. Excellent.
And when you guys left off with Alex's interview yesterday, Alex was talking about how how come not more of the police officers came out, and you were saying you felt that you didn't have enough to circle the wagons. And why don't you elaborate on that a little more? How many officers during the time that you were in contact with felt that something was fishy, something was going on?
I think maybe any that were really outspoken was less than a half a dozen. I had good friends that I really felt I could trust. Become really irritated with me, and I refused to even speak about the bombing. So it was kind of a disappointing time frame, as well as being a cautious time frame about who you did talk to and who you'd believe with what information that you got.
And at any point, did you guys get together and formulate a plan if you were going to come forward, what you were going to say, or did it even make it into that stages?
It never really made it into that stages. There was one or two that I really held as confidence that, especially when I was getting ready to go to the grand jury over Terry Yakey and some of the other issues. Even by then I was warned that I really needed to be careful, and was this really something that I was willing to do, career-wise, more than anything else.
And how long did you stay on the force after OKC?
I retired in '99, so 4 years, almost 5 years later. the wind had gone out of my sails, and it was just really did not enjoy the job anymore.
Right. And then I guess I'm just trying to trace your path of when you started to talk about this more. When did you start doing interviews and talking to people? I know Alex Jones, I think, has interviewed you in the past, and then the OKC guys who were making A Noble Lie.
Pretty much started, I guess, within the first couple, 2 or 3 weeks, beginning with J.D. Cash, on into Roger Charles and some of the other ones that were doing some investigative work to start with.
Mm-hmm. And did you work with Charles Key at all during his investigation?
Yes, sir. Did make meetings with them. However, at that time, I was told that I needed to cease my contacts that I was having, that I was running with the wrong group, that I apparently was part of the militia, and that I was being monitored.
Right.
So I did not want to bring any heat down on Charles or BZ or any of the guys that were Hoppy, any of the ones that were really in the forefront of this. So I did curtail as much as I could meetings with them.
Mm-hmm. And so you said that in Alex's interview about how people were saying you were in a militia. Was the mode going around at the time, like if you had anything to do with any type of militia movement, you were deemed a suspect, I guess? Is that?
To a degree, at least that you didn't hold the same views as what the government viewpoint was on especially the bombing and persons that were behind it.
Mm-hmm. And Holland, when did you guys start interviewing Don for the movie, and how has that kind of progressed into, you know, his story fitting into some of the pieces? You know, there's a lot of pieces to this story. How does Don fit into this for you guys in the film?
Well, I mean, this has been an interesting process because I started out just as a researcher, and so I was reading all these names and studying up on the bombing. Then I meet State Representative Charles Key. I meet Don Browning. I've read about these men's work before, so that was very interesting to go through that. Don Browning, I mean, he took part in the rescue and recovery from day one, from hour one. And he was one of the first to raise questions. He was an Oklahoma City police officer. He's also a former Marine veteran of Vietnam. I'm also a former Marine, so we formed kind of a connection there. But it's, you know, we're dealing with a very, could be called crazy information or something like that. But when you're talking about police officers, state representatives who are presenting evidence that there was something wrong with the bombing, that there was foreknowledge, that there were warnings, that there were other bombs in the building. This is my hometown. It is our duty to try to find out what happened. 168 people were killed in Oklahoma City that we know of. There was an extra leg found in the rubble that no one knows who that leg belongs to. And that person, whoever that was, remains unacknowledged by the official count whatsoever. There are so many unanswered questions. There are so many people who died as a result of this. During the bombing and after, several witnesses have been killed. Terry Yakey, Dr. Plumley, a lot of other people. And we need to find out what happened, because if we don't find out what happened and who ultimately is responsible, it's going to happen again, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah, I agree. And the next one, it's not going to be pretty. They've got the infrastructure set up to really come down on anybody who's outspoken against the government for any reason.
Yeah, I mean, they just passed the NDAA, where they can detain American citizens in the homeland, which is counted as a battlefield. Well, I'm on that list. Our website has been classified as a domestic extremist terrorism website, but it doesn't do anything. We just sell books through it. I mean, that's all it is. So under the new law that's being passed, Don, people who ask questions, his life has already been threatened for asking questions. Now it's going to become legal to literally snatch you up off the streets if you ask questions about the official story. And that's why the Noble Lie is so important, because this is used, they wave the bloody shirt of Oklahoma City to invoke all these police state powers. But they don't actually go after the perpetrators, they use it against the American people.
Right, right. The investigation seemed to be the afterthought. What seemed to be more on the forefront was getting this new terrorist legislation passed at the time. Don, let's go back to OKC. What were you actually doing on that morning before the bombing went off?
I was at my residence. Wednesday night was our canine training evening, so what I normally would work a day shift, so what I would do is sleep in late on Wednesday morning and prepare to train all night Wednesday evening. like I said, was at my residence and felt the house shake. Interestingly, we had had an earthquake a month prior to that, and so I thought it was just another earth tremor. And then almost immediately the phone was ringing and wanting canine units downtown.
Right. And so from the time it happened to the time you arrived, how much time had elapsed during that point?
Probably 35 to 40 minutes.
Okay. And then, you know, when with the dog, you're not really doing much rescue. Were you looking for bodies or bombs? What was the purpose of the dog?
When we first arrived at the scene, of course, I exited the vehicle with the dog. In that very intent was to look for victims. However, we were told to take the dogs away from the scene, to put them back in the cars, so that if we were going to help with any of the recovery, we were going to have to do it alone.
So that's one way they impeded the rescue effort right there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Continue. Go ahead.
We did put the dogs up, came back in. There was two other canine officers, Ron Burks and Randy Claypool, were there at the scene with me at that time. We went back. I think it was a fire chief grabbed Randy and had him guard a door that would be close to where the daycare center was on the south side, to not allow any admission into it. It was a pretty sure drop-off from that point. Burks and I did go back down into the bowels of the building and again worked in that area around Dana Bradley, trying to secure debris in that area to keep it from shifting while they were working on her recovery.
Okay. And then when did the bomb threats at that point start coming in, where they found the second and third bomb that was reported on television?
There was one of those that had already occurred at that point. The second one came shortly thereafter. But again, like I said, I had already talked to one of our bomb techs, and he had told me that it was a toy bomb, that nothing really to be worried about, so I wasn't really concerned about evacuating the building. And